All right. Good morning, everybody. Hey, this one works. So I know you guys have been going through the book of Proverbs, dealing with all the different topics in the book of Proverbs. So today we're going to do something similar, but not quite that. We're going to actually look at the book of Ecclesiastes, because Proverbs isn't the only book of wisdom that Solomon penned. He also wrote Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon. And, for your embarrassment, we're not going through Song of Solomon today. We're going to be going through Ecclesiastes. Now, there's a major connection between these two books, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. Proverbs is a lot of short snippets of advice or wisdom on how to live a godly life, to follow the sorts of plans and hopes and desires that God has for you and what makes up wise living. Ecclesiastes, though, answers a deeper question, and it actually looks at life itself. What is the purpose of it? What matters out of it? So after writing Proverbs in his old age, Solomon looks back on his life and he pens Ecclesiastes, really looking at, after all this wisdom that he gave to people through the Proverbs, especially his son, who most of Proverbs was written to from Solomon, he looks back at life in general and asks, what is the point of even living a wise life or a foolish life? What does it all lead to? What is the meaning of it all? So we're going to look at the whole book. We're not going to look at every verse, as much as I would love to. I will let you guys eat lunch today. So we're going to look at an overview kind of the whole book, and we'll piece things together. But we'll start in chapter 1 and we'll end in chapter 12. So if you want to follow along with me, we're going to open up to Ecclesiastes chapter 1, which starts out like this. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So he identifies himself, King Solomon, the son of David. But he gives himself the role of preacher. He's going to be talking about something incredibly valuable for the reader of his words. He says, "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity." I don't know if you caught that, but everything is vain. Solomon says that over 30 times. Close to 40 times throughout this book, he talks about vanity, and that all things are vanity. You're going to see a few things just in this first passage that set up major themes throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. One of them is vanity of vanities. And he says it 3 times here. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So all is self-serving, all is about me, right? That's what he's starting out with. So as you can probably tell, it's going to be a hoot. Profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun. Now, under the sun is another thing you're going to hear over and over again. It's another thing that happens nearly 30 times in this book. So everything's vanity. What profit can a man have for all of his labor as he toils under the sun? Now, under the sun is a key phrase, and we'll define it in a little bit, but recognize how important that is. One generation passes away, and another generation comes, and the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes towards the south, and it turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually, and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea isn't full. To the place from which the rivers come, they return again. All things are full of labor, man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is what will be, that which is done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. So you're getting Solomon's perspective. This stinks. Everything just keeps going on And remember who Solomon is. Solomon is the king of Jerusalem, not just the king of Jerusalem, the son of David, who brought Israel to its golden age. He was more wealthy than anyone ever. He had more power than anyone ever. He had more fame and influence than anyone ever. And what he's noticed with all that he has accomplished and acquired is it doesn't change anything. Nothing's different. The world has continued, and as I'm about to leave it, it's going to continue on without me. What difference have I really made? It's all done. The ear is unsatisfied with hearing. The eye is unsatisfied with seeing. Everything has happened before. I didn't make a difference. I didn't come up with anything new. There is nothing new under the sun. Now, why that is important is because he's really concentrating on the earthly life that he has lived. He's talking about that which is accomplished in this broken world. And he has the perspective of someone who's lived a broken life. And so he almost has the view of kind of our modern life. The view that permeates culture, this sort of nihilistic look at the world. If there's no purpose to anything, what have I gained? Everything is unfulfilling. So, like I said, real optimistic book. Let's keep going. Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new? It has already been in ancient times before. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. The same triumphs and mistakes that people made in the past, we will make in the present and will be made in the future. People never learn. I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of man by which they may be exercised. Now, first of all, let's just point out that that really, really identifies Solomon as the writer, because he's king over Israel in Jerusalem. There's only one person who was the son of David who was king over Israel in Jerusalem, and that is Solomon. Because after Solomon, the king in Jerusalem was king over Judea, because of the civil war and the split that happened between the northern and the southern kingdoms. So we know this is definitely from Solomon. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for the wind. That's another phrase you see over and over again, and one that paints a picture of the futility of life. You make plans, God laughs. Chasing after the wind, something you cannot hold on to, something you cannot grasp. And this is coming from someone who is successful in everything he tried to do. His answer is, my life was grasping after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight. Remember, these are things under the sun. What is lacking cannot be numbered. I communed with my heart, saying, look, I have attained greatness and have gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge, and I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is grasping for the wind. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So we get the setup to the book. I'm the preacher, says Solomon. I'm going to teach you about this life and what I found in all my success, in all of the things that I've obtained, and all the wisdom that I've gathered, that you yourself have found value in, is grasping after the wind. It's unattainable, it's meaningless, it's vanity. So, hope you're all smiling. Chapter 2, you see his journey. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, but surely this also was vanity. I said of laughter, madness, and of mirth, what does it accomplish? I searched in my heart for how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven. All the days of their lives I made my great works. I built myself houses. I planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchard. I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself pools of water which to water the growing trees of the grove. I acquired male and female servants and servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the special treasures of kings and of the provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the sons of men, and musical instruments of all kinds. So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor. Then I looked at all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor which I had toiled. And indeed, all was vanity, and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. And Solomon tells you what he's doing. He's taking all that wisdom that he's obtained because he asked for it and God gave it to him. And he says, I'm going to search out life. With all the success and money and power that he's gained from that wisdom and to utilize it for his political alliances and everything that he's gained, he says, I'm not going to withhold anything from myself. I'm going to search out all that life has to offer to see what value there is in it. He tried to make himself joyful with wine. He did not withhold any pleasures from his flesh. He endured and experienced all the pleasures that life has to offer, and what he found is none of it's fulfilling. It's all grasping after the wind. As soon as the pleasure is gone, you're left unfulfilled once again, and life is empty. So, how's your retirement plan coming? As for him, there was no profit under the sun. It didn't make any difference, all that he had gained. I'm going to tell you something real quick. This is one of the books that, of the wisdom literature in Scripture, it's my favorite. That would be, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Job, and in the New Testament, James. This is my favorite of all the wisdom literature. It's one of my favorite books in all of the Bible, and especially the Old Testament. It is one of the books I tell people who are trying to read Scripture for the first time. I often tell them to start here, which you might be thinking right now, that sounds depressing. But if you don't have a relationship with God, everything Solomon is saying makes a whole lot of sense. When you are chasing after what this world can offer, you will consistently find it unfulfilling. Jim Carrey once said that he wished every person could get their wish granted for all of the fame and fortune they want, so that they could find out that the answer is not found there. It's very similar to what Solomon is saying. There's no profit under the sun. We're going to skip down to verse 17 here in chapter 2 and get a glimpse at how Solomon feels about all of this. Are you ready for this joyful experience? Therefore, I hated life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all is vanity and grasping after the wind. I hated all my labor, which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he'll be wise or a fool? Yet he will rule over all my labor for which I toiled, and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. Therefore I turned my heart and despaired of all the labor in which I had toiled under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill. Yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. For what has man for all his labor and for the striving of his heart with which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful, and his work burdensome. Even in the night his heart takes no rest. This also is vanity. Now imagine Solomon looking at his life and everything he's accomplished. Israel's borders have expanded to the largest they will ever be until Christ comes. The palace and the gold that has been collected and the wealth and livestock and crops are all larger than anyone ever before. He's wealthier than ever. There's peace that has lasted longer than ever. He has more property. He has more fame, more influence than ever. And he goes, you know what I learned from that at the end of my life? All of the work I put into building this is something I can't take with me, and I have no control over what someone will do with it after I leave. I can't control whether my son, whom I give this to, will be wise or a fool, and it turns out he's a fool. Because as you look through the books of 2 Kings, you find out Rehoboam doesn't take the wise counsel from the people who lived under Solomon's reign. He takes the wisdom of his youthful friends and increases the taxes and the oppression on the people, and Israel becomes two nations. Everything that Solomon built broke in half by the one who came after him. He saw it coming. I have no control over what someone will do with the legacy that I built. So what's the point of having one at all? Because what I built doesn't even remain. It's all vanity. All vanity and chasing after the wind. Now, in the next chapter is probably the most famous part of the book of Ecclesiastes. It opens up with a poem that we probably all have heard and recognize and maybe even can recite. Solomon writes, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace." Solomon writes this at the end of his life as the most powerful man in the world. The most influence, the most wealth, the most power, the most fame. And what he has come to realize is that he's not the author of life, he is subject to it. In all of his life, with everything that he had gained control and power over, he's still subject to everything that life has to offer him. He cannot manufacture joy or sadness or war or peace or time to gain or a time to lose. He is a subject of life. Which means that from the very beginning, we've been trying to gain authorship over life. We've been trying to take a God seat, and we all continually fail to do so. Because we're a subject in the story, not the authors of it. And as hard as we try, we can't manufacture things. We try, and sometimes we think we succeed, but there is no security in our efforts because we don't control anything. So I know you're thinking right now, way to go, Tony Robbins. I feel real motivated. Solomon has more for us, so I hope you're ready. Verse 11, he says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time, and he has also put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end." I want to stop on that verse for a second. Because in all of this, frankly, whining that Solomon is doing, and it's it's real wise whining. I mean, he's making a serious, solid point. And if you don't have a relationship with God, it's one you very much understand. And even if you do have a relationship with God, you've been there. But in the midst of this, he points out that God has made everything beautiful in its time. And even in the coming and going, the to and the fro, and the lack of control that we have over this life that we want control over, you cannot help but notice the beauty in it. He has put eternity into their hearts. How is it that these temporary beings, whose life is so fleeting, of which control we have nothing over, have eternity in our minds? How has human nature always grasped this concept that there is more than time? Why is that? And he goes on to say a profound thing. No one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. Over the 4th of July weekend and week, my wife and I and family went and visited a friend of mine. He just had his third, he's recovering from his third surgery in the last 18 months. He had cancer, had it removed. It came back, and he just had it removed again, and now is cancer-free. And so I haven't been able to see him as I've been talking to him through this process over the last nearly 2 years. We went to visit him in his house, and in his living room, he has these decorative, you know how it is, people have fancy things in their home. He has these decorative picture frames with 3 reliefs of tree stumps. Not family photos, just something decorative. And I thought it was quite odd. I thought they were pretty, but odd. And my daughter asked me about these, and she said, "What are those?" And I said, those are tree stumps. And a relief is when you take a canvas or a paper and you place it on something, and the texture of that thing comes out when you rub on it. And so the texture of the tree lines are the things that are printed on these relief paintings. And I said, all of those rings tell you how old the tree is. Each one of those is a year of the tree's life. And she thought that was cool and walked away and ran away and left me in my contemplation, which is a dangerous place for me to be. But it was sort of an epiphany for me. It was a moment where I looked at it and I understand what Solomon's saying here. Those reliefs are made in the image of the tree they came from. But you could never fit the tree inside the painting. The tree exists in a much deeper reality out in nature in 3 dimensions. You can never fit 3 dimensions inside of 2. So while the thumbprint is on it and you know where it came from, that thing can never grasp the reality of what made it. And I suddenly understood why it's so hard for us to grasp the fullness of eternity and God. We are made in his image, but we cannot fit his image. He exists in a much deeper, further reality than we do. C.S. Lewis put this the best in The Great Divorce. In The Great Divorce, there's a moment where a man is traveling on a bus to heaven. That's the story. When he enters into it, he has not accepted fully that he belongs there. Is sort of the image that C.S. Lewis is painting in his book. And what he talks about from this man's experience walking in heaven, but not fully understanding his place there, is that the grass hurts his feet. And when he steps on the water, it's almost like a treadmill taking him out because he doesn't sink into the water. The reason he paints that picture in The Great Divorce is to say that the heavenly realm, the place where the man is more real than the man. So the grass doesn't bend at the weight of his foot because the grass is more real than the man in heaven. He doesn't sink into the water. The water takes him away and he floats on top of it because the water is more real than him. He can't penetrate that which is more real than him. It isn't until he fully embraces the sacrifice. It isn't until he fully embraces what Christ had done that he can experience the realness of heaven and become a part of the realness of heaven. That's the idea. Heaven is more real than earth. God is more real than we are. He exists in more reality. We are subject to 4 dimensions, if you include time. God is beyond that and more real. And so while we're made in his image, and his thumbprint is all over creation so that no man has an excuse, we can recognize that we are made from a creator, but we cannot fully comprehend the creator because we are less real than the creator. That's the idea, I think, that's being painted here in Ecclesiastes. He goes on to say, I know that nothing is better for them than to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all of his labor. It is the gift of God. I know that whatever God does, it shall be forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it that men should fear before him. That which has already been and what is to be has already been, and God requires an account of what is past. And so in the midst of his complaining and understanding that life is futile, he recognizes the Creator and how all of it comes to his account because he's the one who's in control. Even with all the power Solomon amassed, he realized in the end, he has none and God has all of it. He goes on to say in verse 18, I said in my heart concerning the condition of the sons of men, God tests them, and they may see that they themselves are like animals. For what happens to the sons of men also happens to animals. One thing befalls them, as one dies, so dies the other. Surely they have all one breath. Man has no advantage over animals. For all is vanity, all go to one place, all are from the dust, and all return to dust. Who knows the spirit of the sons of men which go upward, and the spirit of the animal which goes down to the earth? So I perceive that nothing is better than that a man should rejoice in his own works, that is his heritage, for who can bring him to see what will happen after him? Now, as he acknowledged the eternal that's in the hearts of men, he's struggling with the concept. Men are just like animals, made from the dust, and to dust we will return. We all go to one place. But then he makes the separation. Yes, the animals return to the earth, but what happens to the spirit of a man? Does it go upward? How do we know what happens to us when we're gone? And now he's asking the question of the eternity that's in our hearts. And remember, his complaint is with everything that's under the sun, not with where the spirit may go after. And we start to break through the wisdom that's going to be brought by the end of this book. So we'll take a brief look at something in chapter 4, which is to say, in verse 9, value of companionship, really. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm, but how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Now, I share that with you not only because it's a pivotal verse or section in Ecclesiastes, but it was also something that we read at my wedding. It was something that my wife and I wanted to understand as part of our life. That to be alone is vulnerable. You are open with no defense because you have no one to help you, no one to shield you, no one to have your back. 2 is better than 1. You can have each other's back. Like in Vietnam when they would sleep back to back so that eyes could be looking at a 360 distance so that you are safer when you have a companion. But a threefold cord is not easily broken. If God is in the midst of our relationship, it is that much stronger. There's a reason they braid rope. It's stronger. Now in chapter 5, he goes on to say, do not be rash with your mouth, this is verse 2, and let your heart not utter anything hastily before God. For God is in heaven, and you on earth. Therefore let your words be few, for a dream comes through much activity, and a fool's voice is known by many words. That's true. Isn't it interesting how people who often know the least about a subject talk the most about it? At least in media, we know that that's true. Verse 4, when you make a vow to God, do not delay to pay it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you have vowed. Better not to vow than to vow and not pay. Do not let your mouth cause your flesh to sin, nor say before the messenger of God that it was an error. Why should God be angry at your excuse and destroy the work of your hands? For in the multitude of dreams and many words there is also vanity, but fear God. Well, it's interesting now that God has been brought into the equation, that even when he's acknowledging the futility of the things that he does, and how sometimes your mouth can go before your actions and you write a check that you can't cash, and he says, be weary of that and fear God. Because once God is brought in, now there's extra purpose and meaning to what's happening. There's consequences now, because it matters more than just what I get out of life. He goes on to say in verse 10, he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This is also vanity. And you see this theme throughout much of Ecclesiastes, that all of the things that he gained didn't satisfy. Greed is never fulfilled. There's never enough. Lust is never fulfilled. There's never enough. Pride is never fulfilled. You're never great enough. The way that sin controls our hearts is that we chase after something that we can never fully accomplish because it will never be satisfied in this world. And Solomon acknowledges that. He goes on to say it in verse 15, as he came from his mother's womb, naked he shall return. To go as he came, and he shall take nothing from his labor, which he may carry away in his hand. And this is also a severe evil, just exactly as he came, so he shall go. And what profit has he who labored for the wind? Now imagine this, the most powerful man ever realizes that when he dies, nothing he has gained in this life goes with him. In fact, the way he came into this world is exactly how he leaves this world, with exactly as many possessions. None. And no matter how hard you work or how powerful you become, you cannot change that. It's a story of completely unveiling the reality that the control we think we have really belongs to God. And so we're much better off submitting to him. We're going to skip right on to chapter 7, but we'll go right to the end of chapter 6, the last verse. It says, for who knows what is good for man in life all the days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? Who can tell a man what will happen him after him under the sun? In the early part of chapter 7, verse 1 says, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. Better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sad countenance the heart is made better. That's not a great verse for someone who likes to tell jokes, but it's true. The heart of the wise is in the house of the mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. For like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Now think of the connection there between the end of chapter 6 and the beginning of chapter 7. At the end of chapter 6, he's saying, how do we even know what happens to a man after he's gone? And then he talks about the house of mourning, as though celebrating the life of someone or mourning the life of someone who's passed. Because this is what Solomon's contemplating in his old age. He's going to leave the earth. And he actually says it's better to be in a house of mourning than in a house of joy, a house of laughter. Why? Because that's the mentality that he's in when he's writing this book. And you know what it's brought him? A deep wisdom he wished he appreciated more in his youth. Because when he's actually contemplating things that are eternal instead of things that are temporal, he has a better perspective on what really matters. We just had our young adult ministry meet on Friday, and before we even started talking about the topic of conversation, the funny thing is that I'm in my 40s and leading this group of young men and women. And so I pointed out that I'm old, and they laughed at that and said, "What's it like?" Right. It's basically the same. I hurt more. Physically, probably less emotionally. So, it's a trade. But I told them, I actually think that there's a lie in this world that you've been told, which is to stay young and irresponsible for as long as possible because that's where the fun is. And I said, that is hogwash. Because the truth is, living like that, while you might get experiences of pleasure, for sure, short-term pleasure, and you're able to travel or do things that you might look back on with positive memory and have fun, the truth is it's a meaningless existence. If you have no responsibility, you have no purpose. You are chasing after the wind. What I found out is that when I decided to finally grow up and become an adult and have a family and start caring about what I was leaving behind, that I had a purpose. And a short trip that left me with a temporary pleasure and a positive memory that fades into the background is nowhere near as meaningful or as great as a lifelong purpose that propels me to wake up in the morning. It is a lie that has captured generations. And it has left us with the kind of writing that Solomon is doing. I'm doing all of these great things. I'm having this fun life. Social media pages are filled with, look at how great things are on the outside. But we're left with all of the turmoil and reality that there's no meaning or purpose behind it. And we've lost the strive for that which is eternal. And that which is eternal guides us towards a better future, towards better families, towards more meaning in life, and towards making the actual difference in the world that we all claim we seek. The gospel. It goes on to say in verse 15, I have seen everything in my days of vanity. There is a just man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs life in his wickedness. Do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp this, and also not remove your hand from the other, for he who fears God will escape them all. Wisdom strengthens the wise more than 10 rulers of the city. For there is not a just man on earth who does good and does not sin. Also, do not take to heart everything people say. Let you hear your servant cursing you, for many times also your own heart has known that even you cursed others. All this I have proved by wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. He looks at this moment, and he realizes all of these different things, that righteous people and wicked people go through the same experiences. That doesn't seem fair. Why is it that life comes for everybody? Both the blessings and the curses. Why is it that wicked people get away with it or get to experience joys? Why is it that righteous people seem to go through these times of trial and terror and tragedy? Why? Why is that? And it's this broken world, and it's unfair, and it doesn't make sense to him. and to him it's vanity. He goes on to say, for that which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it out? I applied my heart to know and to search and to seek out wisdom and the reason of things, to know the wickedness of folly, even the foolishness and madness. And I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart it snares and nets, whose hands are fetters. He who pleases God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be trapped by her. And he goes on to talk about the fact that the world will grab a hold of you. He points out in this that as he's looking at it, and he says there are these righteous people and these wicked people, and we all experiences the ups and downs, the hills and valleys of life. It doesn't seem fair that life seems so even for everybody when some should have more and some should have less based on their performance for God. But he also points out that, guess what? There isn't a single man on earth who doesn't sin. We've all earned it. That's the problem. And he points out here in this last piece that the lusts of the heart, the lusts of the flesh ensnare you. If you can avoid it and escape from it, great, but the sinner is always trapped by it. But what did he say before? There isn't a single man on earth who hasn't sinned. We've all been trapped by the lusts of the flesh. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit for the sake of time to chapter 11, as much as I wish I could do it all with you, but we're going to get to, it's kind of repetitive. There's a lot of stuff that, it's all going on, this examination of life and this understanding of everything you do and chase after is chasing after the wind, because under the sun, there's nothing you can do to change the author, because you're not the author. You're the subject of the story. You're a subject, not of the story. You're a subject in the story. You're not the author. And so ultimately, after dealing with all of this and seeing that it's only futility trying to change it because you're subject to life, you don't control it, he comes to these conclusions starting in chapter 11. In verse 9, he says, "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these God will bring you into judgment. Therefore remove sorrow from your heart and put evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity." So he starts out by saying, hey, enjoy your youth, take in the pleasures of this world, but be careful, because you will be under judgment for that which you do take in. So make sure what you take in is good. Remove sorrow from your heart. Put away evil from your flesh. Childhood and youth are vanity. And then in the early stages of chapter 12, as he's closing up this book, he starts in verse 1, still speaking to the youth. "Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw near when you say, 'I have no pleasure in them.' While the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain." And so Solomon's suggestion and advice to those who are young is, the world is beautiful. There's a lot to take pleasure in this world that's still good. Avoid that which is evil. Do that by remembering your Creator in your youth. Seek him early before it's difficult. Because once life has beaten you up and the joy of life has been sucked out of you, it's really hard to find the beauty in your Creator. Instead, you feel like you're at war with him. Where if you can come to the acknowledgement in your youth, you can see the beauty, the hills and the valleys, the beauty and the ugly of life, and know that you're not in control of it. He is. But if you're only pursuing that which is earthly, you'll never find joy or fulfillment, and you'll only be angry with him for putting you here. But if you're searching for that which is eternal, you know that it's better on the other side of life. And he goes on to say, in verse 9, "Moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out, set in order many proverbs. The teacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright, words of truth. And I think here he's even acknowledging that throughout his life, it is important that he did those earlier works. It is important that he provided the proverbs for living a godly life. Why is that important? You see in his conclusion. Because he still taught people knowledge. He taught them proverbs. He gave them knowledge of how to live a godly life because, in verse 13, he says, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter." Now, this is the conclusion of all, his observation of life and everything that's within it, the purpose behind it. Does it matter? Does it not matter? What should man do with the life that they've been given? Where is fulfillment found? What do you do with this eternity that's been written in your hearts? This is the conclusion of that matter, of which he's happy to have written the Proverbs to help people live a godly life. Why is that important in his conclusion? Because the conclusion of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commandments. This is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. And at the end of it all, Solomon's conclusion is that life is fleeting. He has no control over it. Everything under the sun is grasping after the wind. So what is the purpose? Why is life important? How can you be fulfilled in it? By not looking under the sun, but above it. Fear God, keep his commandments. This is man's all. Because what separates us from the animals, as he pointed out, is our bodies might go to the earth, but where does the spirit head? Upward, to be judged for every good and every evil. So if we seek God first and his kingdom, everything else will follow after. Those are the words of Jesus, echoing the wisdom of Solomon. So while everything under the sun is fleeting and grasping after the wind, and we have no real control over it, and we're subject to it, we're a subject, a part of the story, we're not the authors of it. The purpose of life is to look at the author of it and follow him, because that's where fulfillment is found, not in the lusts or the pleasures of this world. Only him will we find fulfillment. That's the conclusion of the matter. Let's pray. Father God, thank you so much for the wise words of Solomon. Thank you for his examination of life. God, I pray that there's a piece of this that we really adhere to, that we don't ignore what was done in the past or the wisdom of the past, but actually learn from the mistakes of the past, that we follow Solomon's advice and don't make his same mistakes, but let his failure be our lesson, and learn to follow God as early as possible. Help us to follow you, to seek you, and that which is eternal, to find true fulfillment and purpose in this life, so that we can be on the beneficiary side of your story. Thank you for offering us salvation. Help us embrace it. In Jesus' name, amen.